Coming from the farthest reaches of the universe to challenge the worst toy repairs on Earth is the most powerful hero ever, toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we've really got quite a challenge on our hands because in front of me here you can see I have this vintage Adventures of Indiana Jones map room version of Indy that really has seen quite some action in his time. He's missing a part of one arm, he's got a big chunk missing on this side here, and I want to try and get him back up into a sort of displayable state. Now in the olden days when I would have looked at a figure like this, I'd have thought, this is beyond repair, and I would have just sort of put it in a parts bag never to be seen again, or I'd have picked pieces of it to fix other toys. But now when I look at this figure I sort of see a future project because I know I can get it looking pretty reasonable. It's going to take a fair amount of work, as you can see, because we've got some serious damage to it, but I reckon in the end we can end up with a pretty good looking map room version of Indy. So let's get on with the challenge and see if we can get this guy fixed up. So here we have the map room version of Indiana Jones, and here in the UK these Kenner figures are incredibly hard to find, so even a figure in this sort of state is well worth saving, and that's why I'm going to sort of get this fixed up, because just finding this figure in sort of a normal toy fair or anything like that, it's almost impossible. And if you do find them, they are incredibly expensive, so it's worth the time and effort to try and get this fixed up. So what have we got to do? Well, you can see he's missing a big chunk of his shoulder here. It looks like it's been sort of ripped apart at some point. He's also missing his right hand there. The mechanism doesn't work. I have a feeling we won't be able to get the mechanism working, but we can get everything else fixed up on him. He's also missing his robes, but that's no problem. I've done a video before making the robes. And then there's a little bit of paint wear and sort of other things that we need to sort out. So the first thing to do on a project like this is to find parts, and I'm quite lucky in this instance because I do actually happen to have a spare right arm for him. I was sent a whole bag of bits of Indiana Jones figures by Ryan a while back, and I've been using them to fix up other toys and sort of repair other Indiana Jones figures, and there just happened to be a spare right arm. It's missing the post, but the arm is not in too bad condition. He's missing his thumb. That's easy to fix, so that's one part here. I also have a couple of spare heads for this figure, which again is pretty lucky in this instance because I don't often have parts for these figures, but I have two spare heads, and I think one of these is in better condition than the head that's on here. This has got quite a nasty scratch across one eye, so we're going to use that head there as a replacement, and that one can just go back in my spares bag. But we are still missing his left arm. Now normally on something like this I would have a rummage through my Star Wars parts bag, and I've got lots of bits for old Star Wars figures, and quite often you'll find something that is a fairly good match. In fact, I reckon a Han Solo, early Han Solo figure would have had an arm that is pretty similar to that, so that's probably would have been my starting point. But for this one I actually have this, which is one of the retro collection versions of Indiana Jones. This is actually the Temple of Doom version of Indiana Jones that was released fairly recently, and I've actually used parts of this for other projects and other repairs. And the reason I took this figure apart was because it seems like a second. There's lots of marks all over. You can see there's a mark on the back of his leg there, there's marks on his hands. It just wasn't a very well sort of made figure. So we are going to be using this for his left arm because I think it's a pretty close match to the original. If I put the two arms together, I think that will work really pretty well. So that is going to be the left arm, and then obviously we've got to rebuild everything here, which I'm going to be doing with milliput, and we need to do some plastic weld to try and stick everything back together. We've got to repair this arm with a bit of Lego. It's going to be quite a project, as I say. So they're all the parts. We now need to remove this arm from this figure. I'm going to be using the boil and pop method to remove this arm. So essentially I boil up some water, put this figure in the just boiled water, let the plastic warm up. It will soften the plastic of the arm, and then we can just pop that out of its socket, and we'll use that on the new figure. So let's get this arm removed, and then we can start rebuilding this figure, see what we can do with him. As you can see, the arms came off really easily, so this is the arm that we need. The actual fixing is different to the vintage one. They've made this post a lot thicker, and I'm guessing that's because the plastic used on here is really very bendy and rubbery, so they've had to make that thicker so that it actually stays firmly in the body. So we are going to have to modify that. There are a few other changes as well. The fixing for the head is also different compared to the vintage figures, and if you want to see more about that, then check out my exclusive series on the cutting mat, which is a series that I've recorded for my Patreons and YouTube channel members. There are always links in the description as to how to get access to that. I also took off his right arm just because it was quite interesting to see how this is constructed. The original arms, it's all sort of one piece, but again on this, I'm guessing because this plastic is so bendy and rubbery, the mechanism inside wouldn't work with that sort of bendy rubbery material. So there's this extra piece of plastic here, which is the mechanism inside, and then this right arm just sort of clips in place. It does actually mean, because of this, that these arms are going to be very easy to swap. So if you wanted to put this sort of bare arm on one of the other figures that had this mechanism, you would just have to sort of warm it up and you can pull the arm off. It's very strange indeed. But anyway, those are now spare pieces that I can use for another project, because all I needed was this arm, and we will have to modify it, as I say, but that should fit on there. Now we can take some of these pieces off here and start working on this. So the head is very easy to remove. You just have to pull that off. It's held on with a post which is on the body. As you can see, it's very different to how the modern figures are done. And then we need to remove this arm, and I can actually see this whole body has split apart. It's sort of coming apart at the seam. So I reckon if I just put a knife in there and give a little twist, we should be able to open that up enough to remove the remains of this arm, and then we'll start repairing another arm and see what we can do to get that put in. Yeah, there we go. So that's that arm out. And you can see that there is quite a difference in the shape of the arm posts. It's a lot thinner, and the little piece that holds it in is a lot further in. So yeah, we're going to have to modify both of those, which is what we're going to do now.
Toy-polloi. That is incorrect. Try again.
Let's deal with the right arm first. And I wasn't sure what the plastic was like on these arms, but these old arms are made up actually of fairly solid plastic, which I think will work with plastic weld. So I'm going to first try removing this post off this broken arm and seeing if we can actually plastic weld onto the old arm. It may work, and it's certainly worth a try. The break on here is fairly neat, so if I can cut this off, you know, with a little bit of a bulge to it, maybe we can get something that actually sit in that old sort of break on there. It's certainly worth a try, so I'm just going to give it a go. I've got a knife here. I'll see if I can cut this off neatly and then shape it a bit, and we'll see if we can plastic weld those together. If that doesn't work, I'm going to use Lego. I'll drill a hole in this and I'll insert a piece of Lego, but it's worth a try now that we've got this piece. And this arm is essentially scrap anyway, because it's got so much damage to it, so we're not going to lose anything if it doesn't work. That has actually worked incredibly well. The bond seems to be very tough indeed. So this arm is the right plastic for plastic weld, and it's fused nicely. So I'm sort of thinking as well, we might even be able to get the actual spring mechanism working, because that's fixed so firmly. So I've taken the spring out of the inside of the body as well. And yeah, once we put that back together, I think the whole of that will work. But before we can put that arm in, we actually need to sort out this arm. And as I said, this post is just the wrong shape. So we are going to be replacing it with this, which is a Lego axle pin. And these fit absolutely perfectly in the side of the figure there. That's a really good fit, but we have to modify it because we've got to make it so there's this same sort of little lip that you've got here. So I'm going to cut away this original post and then I'm going to stick this one in. I'm going to have to drill a small hole into this as well just to get that so it's sort of a nice firm fixing, and then we'll cut away the back end of this axle pin. Shouldn't take too long to do. I've actually shown this a few times before, so if you watch my video on fixing up the Adventures of Indiana Jones Bearlock figure, I did exactly the same on that because the arm was snapped in a similar way. So let me just get this all modified and glued in place, and we can see if we can put this back together. But I'm very hopeful now that we can get this figure looking nice. Everything is going far better than I'd expected. I think everything's looking pretty good now. So drilling into this plastic, this modern plastic, it's really awkward because it's so rubbery and the drill just doesn't want to sort of grip to it, but you can do it with a little bit of perseverance. And then I've just super glued in that piece of Lego. I've sort of measured as close as I can where that little lip should be, and I think that will now fit in and sort of hold in place. Once I sort of hold this body together, you can see that that does actually rotate and it's sort of held in place in the correct position. Currently it looks like his shoulder is a little bit too high, but that's actually because the back of his chest there is missing. You can see there's a piece missing, so by the time I've built that up, I think that shoulder will be about the right height. So that's that side done. We can now go ahead and try and put this back in. So this has got the spring-loaded mechanism. I've never tried to refit this into a figure like this, so we'll just give it a go, and I hope I can sort of get it back in there. Once I've got both of these arms in, I need to run a little bit of plastic weld around to join all these pieces together before we can start reconstructing. And I need to be quite careful with that because I don't want to plastic weld these arms in place. I've just got to put that on the joints of the torso and not attach the arms to it. So yeah, a bit tricky, but I think it can all be done. And then once those are on, he's going to start actually looking like a complete figure again. The rebuilding of that small section shouldn't take too long at all. So let's try and get all of these pieces inside him, and then yeah, we'll see what happens. He's actually starting to look pretty good. You can see that I've just put his head on just to check that everything still fits, and most of him is actually looking really rather good. We're just missing this bit on the shoulder here, so that I'm going to fill in with some Milliput. The only sort of awkward thing with that is that I don't want to stick the arm to the Milliput, so I'm actually going to put a little bit of Vaseline just on that Lego post so that I'm hoping the Milliput doesn't stick to it, and then I can sort of sculpt over the top, and then yeah, once it's all dry the arm should still move freely. That could be a little bit awkward, so we'll just sort of see how that goes, but everything else on him is not looking too bad. I've also prepped his thumb because his thumb was missing, and I've shown this again in multiple videos. I've essentially drilled a very tiny hole in there and put a tiny piece of paper clip in. I can then sculpt on top of that with the Milliput as well, and we'll sort of sculpt him a new thumb. So yeah, he's pretty much ready to go. So I'll just remove his head again because we don't need that on while we're sculpting. It's just going to get in the way. So I'll just pull that off like that, and there you can see that's what we're left with filling. There's a tiny little hole there as well where there was a piece of plastic missing, so I've got to fill that in and then build up this shoulder and try and sculpt it and add some detailing and these sort of epaulets and other folds and stuff into the Milliput. I think we should be able to get something. So yeah, let's mix the Milliput up, we'll build his thumb and we'll build him a new shoulder. It's now 24 hours later, and as you can see, it's not looking really too bad at all. I've done a little bit more shaping, especially on the thumb, just to neaten that up a bit. But you can see the bit that I've made there out of the Milliput doesn't look too bad at all. So I've now got to give it a little coat of paint. Matching paint so that it matches the finish of the plastic is always hard. So I'm really just going to go for the tone there, which is going to be a little bit of a join there. But at the end of the day, we're going to be putting a robe over the top of this anyway, so I don't have to be that accurate. I'd like to get it as close as I possibly can. And then for matching the hands, and that shouldn't be too hard at all because we have flesh colour paints that are a pretty close match as it is. So for his flesh colour, I'm going to be using a Humbrol 61, which is a flesh tone. I'll probably mix that with a bit of white just to tone it down a bit, and I'm going to repaint this hand as well. On these modern hands, the actual arms are made out of a flesh colour plastic, and then the shirt is painted on, but you can see that this one has some damage to the plastic at the end, so I'm going to repaint it so it looks like the original one, which would have been painted. And then for his shirt, I'm going to be mixing a few colours together. I have this game colour called Bone White, which is 72.034, and that's a fairly good match for the colour of his shirt, but I have added just a little bit of white to that just to tone it down, and I think that'll be as close as I can get. It maybe I have to add a tiny amount of this flat yellow just to sort of match it in, but I think we'll be able to get a reasonably good match out of those two paints. So let's get all of these bits painted up. We can then put his head back on, and then we'll deal with making some new robes for him. And there we go, with the addition of this clear satin varnish top coat, the end result is really not too bad at all. There's a little bit of a difference between the tone of them, and that's because this is paint and this is bare plastic, but the overall effect is very good. And you can see there as well his thumb, which has now been replaced and painted. You wouldn't even be able to spot that. So this figure is now ready to have some robes made for him, so let's get on with that. Now for the robes for this figure, I've actually made some of these before. I made some custom robes for a vintage Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi and Sand Person, and the pattern is essentially the same. So I've just gone to my own website, toy-polloi.com, and downloaded the pattern that I made for that. I've now cut that out into this fabric, which is called toy knit or looped fleece. I will put a link to that in the description, and I just need to do a bit of sewing. You can see that you just fold this over. I need to turn it inside out, but I'll then sew along these edges here just under the arms, and we'll end up with some robes that actually fit this figure really nicely. We also need a little bit of a cord to go around his waist, so I've got this quite nice sort of woven cord that I picked up a while back, and I just tied a knot on each end, and you end up with a fairly nice looking belt. So if I sew this onto the robes as well, that will work. Yeah, I think that will work at the right scale. So just need to do a little bit of sewing on this. I'll put a link also to the original video where I made the capes and robes for the Obi-Wan, because you can follow all of the processes that I go through in that video in detail, and you'll see exactly how I make this. And you really don't need much sewing skills to do this. If you can sew a stitch, you can essentially get these put together, because we've just got to sew along this edge and along that edge. So let me get this one sewn together, and we'll put it on the figure and see how he looks. The cape's on and he's looking good. I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. As I say, I've made these before, so I sort of knew that this would work really well. He actually is starting to look like the map room version of Indiana Jones. The final things we need to do are just add a couple of accessories. So I'm going to add a little bag, which is Indy's bag. You'll have seen me make these in a recent video. This is based off the retro collection bag that comes with the Last Crusade version of Indiana Jones. So we can put that over his head. Hopefully it will fit, because he's got a slightly bigger head, this chap, because he's got the sort of turban on. So that goes on there. Yeah, that's cool. And then obviously we need a little map. So here is a map of the map room. This is the map that comes with Belloc. Again, I've shown you how to make this, and you can get the file to print out on toy-polloi.com, and we can just put that in his hand like so. And there we go, that is the finished map room version of Indiana Jones, from a completely smashed up figure to a really nice displayable figure. And there you go, that is it for this project. I knew at the start, as soon as I saw the sort of broken remains of this Indy figure, that I had to have a go at trying to repair him. And it was going to be quite a challenge, because there was so much missing. Obviously we were missing an arm, we had a load of damage to his shoulder and elsewhere. But as you can see, with a little bit of work and a few spare parts and a donor figure with some useful bits on it, I've been able to turn what was a very junky broken figure into a really nice displayable figure. And I'll be happy to put this with the rest of my Adventures of Indiana Jones figures. As I mentioned at the start, these Adventures of Indiana Jones figures are very hard to come by in the UK. So any figure in any condition for me is worth saving. And I hate to see a figure sort of left in such a sorry state. I do need to say a massive thank you to Teague, who actually very kindly sent over the remains of this Indy figure to me. I hope he's enjoyed this video, because it really has been a fun project. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.